During the Second World War, the U.S. Army's 5th Air Force established a rest area at Mackay, Queensland, Australia. From the end of January 1943 until early 1944, hundreds of U.S. servicemen were ferried almost daily from New Guinea to Mackay by air transport to spend 10 days furlough on R&R at the American Red Cross Center. They usually were carried by two B-17 Flying Fortresses converted to transport duties, or several C-47 aircraft, the military version of the commercial DC-3 airliner, that was operated by a detachment from the 46th Troop Carrier Squadron, whose parent unit, the 317th Troop Carrier Group, was located some 400 miles north in Townsville. On Monday, June 14, just after dawn, about 6 a.m., B-17C, call sign VHCBA, took off in fog headed for Port Moresby, with 6 crew and 35 passengers aboard. A few minutes after takeoff, the plane crashed in some trees at Baker's Creek, killing all but one on board. This video presents the observations and reflections of many people over the past 20 years who became caught up in the aftermath of this hushed-up World War II tragedy. It was prepared to tell the full story to families and friends of those 40 victims who still may not know the details of how and where their loved ones died some 70 years ago at Baker's Creek in Australia. The crash has remained relatively unknown outside of Mackay. The families of the victims, because of military censorship at the time, only received telegrams from the U.S. War Department saying little more than that their loved ones had been killed in a plane crash somewhere in the Southwest Pacific. In January 1943, my father, then Captain Samuel Cutler, was appointed the first military commander of the U.S. Army Red Cross Recreation Center, located at the seaside city of Mackay on the northeast coast of Queensland. And while stationed in Australia, he kept a daily diary. And his June 14, 1943 entry, while in Mackay, is of particular note. What a day, and a tragic one. Up at 4 a.m. and lined up 35 enlisted men and 2 officers to go on CBA to Moresby for a 6 a.m. takeoff from the Mackay Airdrome. The weather was misty, and one of those things did happen. Yes, at 6:02 a.m., 2 minutes after I turned my back on the CBA plane, it crashed into some woods 5 miles away and exploded, killing 40 people with only 1 saved. Biggest air crash in American air transport history to date. A few days later, he writes in his diary, "Had a rare experience today. Went to the Mackay District Hospital with Major Siegel, the flight surgeon, to interview the lone and lucky survivor of the crash. His name is Corporal Foy Roberts. And lo and behold, as we got to his bed, we saw his dog tags and a lucky 4-leaf clover hanging over his head. He sure was lucky. The crash was generally unknown outside of Mackay or Australia. It proved to be the worst airplane accident in the Pacific Theater during World War II. Nothing more appeared in the local media until after the war ended in August 1945. There was, however, an official report filed by the local Queensland Police Department on July 4, 1943. This lengthy report, classified, confidential, and secret, remained that way until after the war was over. It was only recently, in 2004, that this local police report was discovered and copies made available. The official flight manifest, listing the names of all personnel aboard the aircraft, was discovered among my father's effects after he died, and in August 1999, brought to Australia to confirm the names of the passengers who perished on that ill-fated flight. The only official U.S. military records about the crash that we were able to find came from microfilm copies of secret classified documents. The historical record of 2 5th Air Force units. From the 46th Troop Carrier Squadron, it reads, "During the month of June 1943, we had our second tragedy. The plane had been grounded for a month, fitted with new gas tanks and 2 engines, test flown the previous day, and checked out to the satisfaction of the pilots, the engineering officer, and the crew chief." And from the 317th Troop Carrier Group historical record, on June 14th, the worst accident in the group's history took place. Taking off from Mackay on a routine flight, VH-CBA crashed, killing 40 of its 41 passengers and crew. This catastrophe was the worst ever suffered in the Southwest Pacific area. These reports were declassified by the Department of Defense in 1958, some 13 years after the war ended. Another historic record was located in the Australian National Library in Canberra and found in the book Diary of World War II North Queensland Air Crashes, a publication by Peter Nielsen in 1993. The brief reference in the book confirms the basic facts, namely, June 14, 1943, U.S. Army Air Force B-17 Flying Fortress crashed at Baker's Creek near Mackay. All casualties were American troops, and a commemorative memorial was built at Baker's Creek in 1992. For the 50th anniversary commemoration of World War II in the Pacific, the Mackay Daily Mercury ran a special issue containing several feature stories and photographs that had accrued in their archives during the war, including the Flying Fortress crash at Baker's Creek. And in August 1999, the Daily Mercury ran an article on the Flying Fortress story, under the byline of Terry Hayes, their local history writer.
Mackay, I've written a few articles regarding the Flying Fortress crash and spoken to people who were on the scene shortly after it. I actually wasn't in Mackay in 1943 when it happened.
You were?
I wasn't.
Yeah.
Later, in 1944, I remember riding out to Baker's Creek And looking at the site of the crash, it was still pretty obvious then. That was 6 months after it.
Now, how long have you lived in this area?
Nearly all my life.
So did you know about this thing happening before they put up the memorial?
Oh yes, yes.
It was well known?
Oh yeah. Well, my father knew because my father was in the American Air Force.
Oh, he was. I didn't realize there was this much recognition here in Mackay for the thing that happened. This memorial was constructed by the people of the Mackay district in honor of the 40 United States military personnel who were killed and the one survivor, and was dedicated on the 11th of May 1992. On the left pedestal are engraved the names of the crew members and the passengers and the survivor, Foy Roberts. The remarkable story of Foy Roberts' World War II survival and the ordeals that affected him the rest of his life have been reported in various newspapers, both in the United States and in Australia. He was the only person among the 41 American servicemen aboard the plane to walk away from the Flying Fortress crash at Baker's Creek on June 14, 1943. Flying was not new to him. It was part of his job as an aircraft engine specialist with the 6th Troop Carrier Squadron. The unit had been among the first to arrive in New Guinea 6 months earlier, when Japanese forces had advanced to the Kokoda Pass, only 30 miles from Port Moresby. Foy Roberts met his Australian-born wife, Vera, in Sydney in 1944. They were married the following year, returning to the United States to live in his hometown of Wichita Falls, Texas. For many years, he worked as a bookkeeper and an accountant with the Larson Oil and Gas Company of Wichita Falls before having major brain surgery in 1975 that left him without normal speech. In May 1992, when the memorial monument was dedicated at Baker's Creek, he sent a personal letter to Mrs. Fay Cole in Mackay, the daughter of the woman who had comforted him in the crash site in 1943. He wrote that he had no idea what caused the plane crash. His only recollection was the silent prayer he was saying, which he always did upon going airborne. Foy Kenneth Roberts died in Wichita Falls, Texas, February 4, 2004, at age 83.
I'm Cole Benson. I'm Mackay RSL Honorary Historian. Mackay RSL is a sub-branch, and the RSL, as it's commonly known, is similar to the Veterans of Foreign Wars, American Legion, the similar American units.
Mm-hmm.
My part in this commenced in 1992 on the 11th of May, the day that the Baker's Creek Memorial was unveiled. I was aware that only the names of the crew plus the survivor had been found at that stage.
Mm-hmm.
I made a rather profound statement to say that I will find the rest.
Good for you.
Fortunately, it proved to be a very difficult job.
Mm-hmm.
And along the way, after 6 months of almost fruitless effort, I came across former Chief Master Sergeant Teddy Hanks, who had lost 4 friends from the 40th Fighter Squadron.
My name is Rod Manning. I was born in Mackay. I worked elsewhere as a younger man, lived in England. I was the editor of the Daily Mercury for over 16 years, but I had a long association with the Mercury before that. And I decided, when I was the editor, to revive interest in the Flying Fortress crash at Baker's Creek.
Mm-hmm.
Primarily because of its news value. The story had been lying dormant for many years, and a number of people even doubted that the crash did occur. It was not well publicised. I've spoken to a number of aviation people who thought I was imagining the incident. So I got going and got stories written and memories recorded of the crash. I was also, and still am, interested in Mackay's history, and that appeared to be one of the most significant events in the district's history.
A converted B-17 transport plane carrying 41 US passengers and crew takes off into a foggy Queensland dawn. But a catastrophe is about to happen. For 2 minutes, the great plane struggles to climb. It's clearly in trouble, and as it tries to return to the airfield, it plunges into a mangrove forest, killing all but one on board.
For more than 70 years, the cause of the crash remained a mystery. In April 2013, a British television crew, led by Garth Bernard of the World War II Air Crash Detective Series, investigated the 1943 Flying Fortress plane crash in Australia. After visiting the crash site at Baker's Creek and sifting through evidence from various reports, news articles, and eyewitness stories, the following statement was issued.
Garth believes that the heavily loaded B-17 suffered some kind of engine failure just after takeoff. With one if not two problem engines, the plane simply wasn't able to climb. During the drama that followed, poor visibility prevented the inexperienced Gidcombe and Erb from having visual references with which to judge their two turns back to the safety of the airfield. With already insufficient engine power, the turns further reduced the speed of the B-17. The result was the eventual stall and crash of the aircraft. The two young pilots were put in an impossible position on that misty morning. The switched-on landing lights suggest they knew they were in trouble and were trying their very best to put down at the earliest moment.
Personally, I think the crew did the very best they could with the situation that they were put in. We do not have all the evidence or the facts, and because of that, the definitive cause of the crash will always remain a mystery.
At the gates of the Arlington National Cemetery in the USA is the Baker's Creek Memorial, which lists the names of all the young men who died. Sitting atop a slab of pink Queensland granite, specially imported from Australia. It's a proud monument resting in one of the most revered locations in the United States, and a powerful reminder that the men who died at Baker's Creek were part of US General Douglas MacArthur's successful defense of Australia against the Japanese.
The war at that stage was only just over the hump, if you like, of real fear in the country that they faced an invasion. So it was in the aftermath of 1942, which had been our year of living dangerously, when Japanese advance got well into New Guinea and Australian forces were fighting with their backs to the wall and to a fair degree alone. This little group of soldiers of a whole variety of disciplines, if you like, from infantry through to air support, were part of the early phase, if you like, of American commitment to Australia and to the defence of Australia.
And so Baker's Creek is another symbol of the sacrifice that both nations have made for each other. It's a symbol of the commitment that the United States made to protecting a weaker nation such as Australia. And Australians, we just don't forget. You know, we don't forget our friends.
It is hoped that the families and friends of the 40 American servicemen killed in the tragic crash of the Flying Fortress may finally learn the full story of what happened at Baker's Creek, Australia during World War II.
year, as we know, marks the 70th anniversary of what is still described to this day as Australia's worst air disaster.
Much has changed for all of us, and the world in which we live since the time of the plane crash. We give thanks to those who have lost their lives serving our nations.
I bring you greetings from America on the occasion of the 70th anniversary commemoration of the Flying Fortress air crash during the Second World War. We are here to honor the memory of the 40 fallen Americans. And I'm here to thank the people of Mackay for preserving their memory for so many years. I feel important, indeed my duty, to represent my American countrymen and women in paying tribute this day to the 40 American servicemen of the Army Air Corps who perished here in 1943, to their families in America, to the loved ones they either loved and lost or never had a chance to know, and to you, the citizens of Mackay, who never will forget them, lest we forget. Thank